Welcome to Call to Healing. We are two mental health practitioners on different parts of our professional journeys come together to have conversations our training left out. From cultural identity to white supremacy in our field, we're showing up despite it to spite it.
Welcome to the second episode of Call to Healing. I'm Blanca. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Nevada.
And I'm Dr. Kassara Dayet. I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Massachusetts. And we want to acknowledge, as we will on every episode, that our meetings are being held on the traditional lands of the Pawtucket, Nuwu, Southern Peyote people. And we pay our respect to elders, both past and present, who have stewarded this land for generations, as we are settlers here on Turtle Island. If you are joining us for the second time for this episode, welcome back. And if this is your first episode, we're happy to welcome you into this space. So, over the next couple of episodes, for just as a refresh for anybody who was here with us before, we're going to be talking about our respective experiences in grad school.
Awesome. Well, we're going to get into today's conversation. And just to get us started, Kassara, tell us what inspired you to pursue grad school and why you chose clinical psychology.
Yes. So it's funny. Since, let's see, yesterday, I guess, I finished reading this book called The Silent Patient. And I promise it's relevant to your question. But I won't spoil it, but essentially it's about like a patient who murders her husband and won't speak about it. And it's about the therapist who works with her. And that's probably the most I can say. But it was really interesting listening to him talk because there's this scene where he's talking about interviewing for a new job. And he talks about what answer he would really give to that question, like what made you chose the field, versus his well rehearsed answer for job interviews. And I think he says something along the lines of like, those of us that get into this field get into it because we're all sort of messed up in some way. And his rehearsed answer is, I want to help people.
Yeah.
And
I knew it. I knew that was a rehearsed answer. I knew it.
Yeah. And he was like, whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, that's why we end up in this field, the messed up part. And I thought that was so interesting because I think I remember many interviews that I had to have during grad school and even for grad school where I was asked this question. And I was always fascinated with why people do the things they do and what choices they make. And I was obsessed with this question of like nature versus nurture. Like, how do people end up making sort of quote bad choices? And at the time, at least in high school, which was when I was asking myself this question, I wasn't really aware of it being connected to interest or issues with social justice. I didn't have the language to name that. But I think ultimately it was both about contextualizing experiences that I had had. I think that was probably a later, more conscious realization. But the more present one at the time that I decided to pursue graduate school in psychology was like, the world is messed up. Why do some people do bad things? And some people, despite the things that have happened to them, take a different path. And I wasn't sure at first if I was going to go to graduate school in psychology specifically. Like, I had thought about law school. I had thought about doing a master's in philosophy at Oxford. So I was all over the place. But like my central question about figuring out people was really the thing that eventually got me to this path.
So, in other words, becoming a therapist initially was your trauma response.
For sure.
Spoiler alert, it's all of ours. It's all of our trauma response.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have any hesitations or doubts about going to grad school?
I think my only hesitation at the time was money.
Yeah.
Um, I was the first person in my family to go to college. I mentioned in the last episode I'm an immigrant, and no one could have prepared me for like the financial expectations and
Yeah.
like really understanding what it meant to sign up for financial aid. And I knew it was just going to cost a lot of money and I was going to have to borrow all of it. And that I'd figure out how to pay it back somehow.
Mhm.
And that money barrier was not a good enough reason to deny myself the opportunity to become a doctor.
Mhm.
So that was like what my brain was doing. So that was the only hesitation I had at the time.
Yeah. Do you wanna tell us a little bit about, like, the program that you went to, and then we'll get into more specific questions, or
Yeah, I mean, I could just talk about it structurally. So I attended Widener University in
Mhm.
Chester, Pennsylvania, and it was a 5-year program, and it was structured really so that it shouldn't take longer than that. Um, you really had to have gotten significantly derailed for that to be the case. And I did do a lot of research on the program, and I chose the program specifically because I really liked some of the interests of the faculty. I liked that it was a lot of the faculty were psychodynamically oriented, which had entered my sort of frame of reference more in my classes in undergrad. And uh, we had practicum, we had internship, just like many other clinical programs. And for anybody who isn't familiar with the difference, a PsyD is clinical psychology, which is more practice oriented, whereas a PhD, there are clinical folks who come out of PhD programs, but PhD programs tend to be more research oriented, and there tends to be more funding available for folks, and stipends, which is not so common in PsyD programs.
right. Yeah. Is there a specific professor or mentor who had a significant impact on your experience?
Yeah. So the person who interviewed me, um, Dr. Proud, and I remember this interview because I had like done really badly on the math GRE section, and he asked me,
Twins.
yes, he was like, help me understand why your grades in math are excellent. You know, I was doing like AP classes, but your GRE score is so terrible. And I told him, I was like, I'm not good at taking standardized tests. Like I really am not. And that also came to bite me in the butt later for the EPPP, our licensure exam. But I was a terrible, terrible test taker. And he said that that was good enough for him. And, you know, he had to ask. And I
Mhm.
think based on that interview plus my interactions with other students, because like we clearly were being observed on interview day, interacting with one another as well.
Mhm.
It was the only program that made me an offer out of everywhere I applied. And he always believed in me and ended up being on my dissertation committee as my chair and was there for some very important moments throughout my time. And I'll probably talk about some of those stories, but yeah, he was definitely a key part. And another professor, Dr. Braybender, Virginia Braybender, she was always encouraging students to do like things to the best of their ability, which is quite inspiring, scary too.
Mhm.
And if she ever hears this, it's okay.
Mhm.
Um, because everybody was like, no, you just do what she asks you to do.
Mhm.
Um, and she was so sharp, and really counseled me on some challenges that came up related to some race issues while I was in the program. And there
Mm.
were other people too externally, but within my program, I'd say um, those were the professors who had such like a huge impact on me.
Well, since you mentioned it, what were some of the racial issues you experienced in your program?
It was, some of it was with other students. Some of it was in class. Like one class, a professor like called on me to answer a question specifically having to do with Black people, and I was just like, not only am I not the only Black person in this class,
Right.
but we do not speak for all Black people.
You don't speak for the whole Black community, Kasara?
Right. No.
Mm.
uh, and there were definitely experiences of, I know I'm competent. Why didn't I get this placement that I wanted? Yeah. And I was dealing with a lot of white women typically who were interviewing me. And I had the experience of being aware that I was experienced as threatening.
Mm.
Um, and even some people in my program later, when I was like trying to more actively make friends, because I was very socially anxious, um, said, "Oh, you're really cool. I thought you were intimidating at first." And
Mm.
like at the time, I don't think I really thought about the racial coding of that kind of thing, because people are like, "Oh, you're just so smart." But I'm like, everybody in this program is smart. So that can't be like the only reason you feel intimidated by me.
Right.
Um
And I remember
and
some of those white folks in your program.
mhm.
A
Mhm.
couple of them stick out because I would see them every once in a while when we'd go out for drinks or something.
Mhm.
And the white maleness, I know you're talking about white women, but there's
Yeah.
specifically a white male. I remember the white
Yeah.
maleness of it all. I'll never forget. I was wearing a necklace that said cunt. Fuck me. Okay,
Mhm.
whatever. It's who I am. I'm a Sagittarius. I wear necklaces that say cunt sometimes. And he shakes my hand and he looks at me and he goes, "Your necklace is very offensive." And
Mm.
just like walked away. Never even
Yeah.
gave me a chance to respond. Oh, I still think about that to this day.
Ugh. Yeah. Yeah, and the way they got away with things that they should have never gotten away with. But yeah, I remember having an incident with another peer, and I don't quite remember what it was at this moment, but I had spoken with um, Dr. Braybender about it, and she was like, you need to develop your repertoire of witty responses to these kinds of things. And that obviously still sticks with me because I remember sort of thinking, how can I respond in a way that throws the other person off, right? Where I'm not the one who's left feeling off kilter
Mhm.
by something offensive, and may also cause them to think about what it is that they said or did. Um, and so that's a thing that I just kind of developed over time. Um, but yeah, I'd say that those are some of the struggles. Some of the struggles. Um,
Did you experience any moments of failure or major setbacks?
um, yeah. So I we have comprehensive exams, and they're like midway through your program to kind of assess where you're at, what you've learned, and decide whether or not you get the master's. Um, and I failed two of my exams, and you only had one chance to take them again. And if you didn't pass the second time, then they would hold you back. And that for me was incredibly challenging. Again, that test taking thing, uh, because there was just information that was blatantly wrong. Like I was a philosophy
Mhm.
major. And so we had like these compare contrast questions where it's like compare Aristotle's philosophy to this psychologist. Insane, not open book, right? And I
Mhm.
answered the question, but because it wasn't what they were looking for, even though I could tell you all about Aristotle in my sleep, like I did not pass that exam. And I remember going to a meeting and arguing about it and showing them the proof that like this is wrong information, and I still was made to retake that exam.
Oof.
And I the other part of that experience that was really challenging for me was that a lot of people had already formed their study groups when we had first started studying. And even though, like, when I could tell I was struggling with some material, I asked if I could join a group, just so I could get some extra support and help from peers. And I was told no
Mhm.
by those peers. Like, oh, well, we've already been in this existing group, as if it would have been like such a huge deal to just add someone else. And I wasn't even asking to like join every single meeting. I just wanted to be able to like get feedback on the area where I knew I was having a hard time, which was neuropsychology specifically. Just the way the topic was taught, it just didn't work for my brain.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was told no. And so I had no one to study with. And I failed two of my. And
Mhm.
so in the second round, I did co study with somebody else who was in a similar position as me. But I felt in that moment, especially, sort of deeply disconnected from and kind of betrayed by people who I expected that maybe I could rely on when I needed support.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is kind of maybe this question feels a little bit redundant, but I think I just want to get at it specifically if there's anything specific you want to mention. But in terms of like biases, discrimination, or favoritism, what did you witness? What did you experience?
Yeah. I mean, my experience was that, you know, sort of the pretty, I'm put that in air quotes for those who are not watching the video. And when I say like, standard white American uh, women
Yeah.
were very much and I had experiences of like speaking up in class, answering questions, and then somebody saying the same thing a few minutes later and that person getting praised for their answer, and I'm sitting there like
What was
what was
different about
wrong with
that?
my answer, like what was different about it. um and so I did actually at some point stop speaking up in class because I was just like, I'm over being overlooked when
Mhm.
I'm really trying hard and participating. And one thing that really sticks out is an issue that I had with a professor who, I was at a site where the supervisor was not experienced in psychological testing. And I really, really wanted to get that experience. And he said, well, you can do testing here as long as you can find somebody to supervise you. And because it was at a child site, I approached one of the child people to help me. And I sent him my first draft of my report, and he said it was garbage. And he refused to sign off on it. And he said he would never sign off on anything that was just so bad, and said he wasn't helping me anymore. And I was devastated because I was like, well, of course I'm not good at this. This is the first time that I'm doing this. It was my second year of grad school. So 2 out of 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was expecting me to somehow know what to do and refused to help me because I couldn't do it. Which is just when you really like let that sink in. Like, I'm not going to help you because it's not good, but I'm asking you for help because I know it's not good.
Right. It's literally your first one.
Right. And I sat in the hallway where the teachers' offices were, like, crying, and Dr. Prout came by, and
Mhm.
he, was like, come into my office, tell me what happened. And I told him, and I was just like, this is really narcissistic thing to do. And I was super upset, and he was like, listen, like, you need to prove like you need to prove him wrong, right? Like, I'm not like this is like your job to do, but more like, if you want to be good at this, you will be good at this, and like, let's think of a way to find somebody who will support you. And so he did find me help, with someone who is still one of my many mentors today. and I ended up being really, really, really good at assessment. And it was one of the things that appealed to Harvard Medical School, Cambridge Health Alliance, when I got recruited there for my postdoc. Um, and that professor tried to apologize to me in my last year, like right after our, it
Oh
wasn't
shit.
commencement, it was like a pre commencement thing
Like
that
a
we had for the
luncheon kind
program.
of award or
A
award
dinner,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, something.
I can't remember what we called it. Um and I knew it was because like the only person who asked him to speak on his behalf was one of the people who really should have not made it through the program, like had done some really awful things. And so it's sort of like, look at you. Because by that point, many of the students had realized this professor was kind of an asshole, you
Mm-hmm.
know? They were like, oh, Cassara, you were right. And I'm like, yeah. Because when I was telling people before, they just didn't believe me. And then they ended up having their own negative experiences with this professor. And they were then forced to say like, oh yeah, you know, but it had already happened to me like quite early on in the program, and I,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so and I remember saying like, I don't accept your apology,
That's amazing.
because like if not for that, I, you know, maybe I would have still made it there anyway, but like I definitely had like a desire to be like, no, like I want to be good at this thing and I will be good at this thing.
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, that was like another major, there were a lot of, there was a lot of stuff.
Yeah. What other kind of things
uh
that you want to
Man.
that you feel like you want to share, if any?
um
If you
I
don't, I
mean,
have another question in
just,
mind. So.
yeah, I think, mm, I think for now that's okay.
Okay. That's
Yeah, if I,
valid. Yeah.
yeah, I'll think, yeah. Mhm.
Well, I think, more or less the same question in terms of bias discrimination. But in regards to like the subject matter that you were learning,
Mhm.
what kind of biases or discrimination did you notice in the source material, in the lectures from your supervisor, right? Like from the
Yeah.
bearers of our field, what did you notice?
I think I wasn't, again, like my consciousness about this evolved over time. Uh to say that I would look at it in the same way uh, now as I did then is not true. But certainly it was heavily pathology oriented,
Hmm.
and there was no real conversation about systems and how they impact people. Like, it was very individualistic. Like, the problem is within the person. And I think I noticed the contrast in the material when I attended conferences.
Mm.
Some conferences where people were having these conversations and thinking about these things, but other conferences or conversations, especially within the psychoanalytic community, where this sort of prevailing um, Freudian, or, and I don't even say that like pejoratively necessarily, um, but like people really not being able to reflect on and think about the way in which the external world plays a role in people's lives,
Hmm.
you know. And I think the material didn't reflect all people, right? And it's not possible for it to do so. However, diversity was very much uh just a class that we took, that was also a really harmful class to us.
Mm.
So yeah, there's just a lot of interconnectedness of mental health and equity and social justice that was missing from
Hmm.
what we were learning.
What do you mean rifts in the class?
So we had like an activity, and for anybody who's been through this, they have like those activities where like the game is designed so that people who have like a certain card or color or whatever, no matter what they do, they'll always lose in the game because it's designed to demonstrate
So it's like a
inequity.
privilege walk type thing.
Yeah. Mhm. But I wasn't, and I remember I wasn't there for that particular class because I was sick, but I remember everyone was really upset after, and people were upset with each other. And whatever it had done, that activity and the way it was handled, like sort of the real life sort of class differences and social issues that existed within our cohort came out through the activity, and there was no sort of debrief around it.
Mhm.
And I remember that hanging over the class for a while, and me and another uh, peer went to the professor. Even though I hadn't been there for the specific activity, I went to the professor with this peer, and I was like, "You need to address this because it has caused actual harm to our group." And I think that there was a conversation, but I don't remember it really doing the transformative work that it needed to do, the repairing work that it needed to do. And some of those issues lingered like through the rest of our time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and I mean, I'm called to ask you about that because same. There was shit that happened early on in our program, in my program for my therapy program that caused major rifts throughout the cohort that never resolved. So that's why I was really curious about that, and I wonder how often that happens, right?
Probably a lot.
Well, so I guess moving on a little bit, but really it's all related. Do you think that there's a pressure to conform to certain academic or ideological views in your program?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and it was communicated to me quite clearly because I was often, uh, as I said in our last episode, the person like sticking my neck out, standing up for issues.
Mhm.
And I remember some peers trying to stand up for an issue that occurred with another peer in our class, and they ended up getting chastised and pretty burned for it. And so they all decided we're never going to stick our neck out for anything ever again. And I remember thinking, wow, what a privilege it is to decide not to keep acting, because it would never occur to me, um, because like my whole life is just continuing to advocate for myself in all kinds of spaces.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling frustrated with peers because after that incident they were like, we're just not doing anything ever again. And so there was a lot that I would like go to our dean alone about and say like, hey, this thing is happening. And it was sort of like, oh my god, you're in my office again, like and so yeah, there was definitely that pressure. And I think because they knew that Dr. Prout was like, pretty supportive and keeping a watchful eye over me, he said, like, there'll always be dragons to slay, but is this your dragon?
Yes.
He was like, not everyone is yours. And he's like, I'm interested in you, like, getting through this program, the least scathed as possible. And so I am aware that it was like his communication to me that like I was not safe. Not that I felt safe, right? But that he was basically saying like I need you to be able to think about protecting yourself more. Um and I think at that point that pressure to conform was pretty high because
Yeah.
that, again, like I said, that compulsion was always there to be like, I need to do something about this injustice, and
Mhm.
our class had decided to do superlatives for graduation, and then they recanted it, but they didn't want to tell me what mine would have been. And somebody did tell me, and it was like most likely to be righteously indignant. And I actually,
I'm having a mixed reaction.
yeah.
Part of me wants to be mad about it, and the other part of me is like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I remember feeling both ways. Like, I
Okay,
remember,
good.
like, feeling offended, but I also remember being like, "That's also very true." But, like, the word righteous as a modifier is really about a sense of, like, you believe you have the right to do this and maybe you don't. Because, like, I do think righteous tends to have a negative connotation associated with it. And when I reflect back on it, I'm like, you know, I did actually embrace it for myself.
Mhm.
Also, I'm very aware of like sort of the white chastising undertone uh,
Right.
when applied to a black person.
Oh, 100%, right? It reminds me of it was we'll talk about it when we get to mine, but someone who I had difficulty with had to in a group setting say something she loved about me,
Mm,
and she said my passion, and I was
mhm, mhm.
immediately enraged, and I think it's the same thing because I know exactly what you mean by that. And you as a little white woman had to do your little white woman thing and be just sweet and kind and like, "Meh," and no one else is going to pick up on this microaggression but
Exactly.
me. Alright.
Mm, mhm.
Well, so I guess speaking of this, I mean, I think you already answered this, but again, just to get a real direct thing, like how diverse and inclusive did you feel your program was? And like, I don't even mean the people, like the demographics of the people, but also the source, again, the source material. How diverse was that? How diverse were the examples? How diverse? Yeah.
Yeah. The source material wasn't particularly diverse. I will say, though, that there was at least a very passing emphasis on making sure that we were familiar with Pamela Hayes's addressing framework, and thinking about different dominant and subjugated identities, and like
Mm-hmm.
not just that of the client, but us as clinicians. And we were trained to compare and contrast those things in a way that, though superficial, I later learned really hadn't it wasn't being done in other programs.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I mentioned that framework to people, nobody knew what I was talking about. And now it's like there's a proliferation of it, especially with like conversations about intersectionality and Kimberly Crenshaw's work. And it's more prominent in the field, and it's being thought about as being actively integrated into requirements for our education. But at the time that I was in school, that was not the case. And so I think that the short answer to your question is not much, and also I still think I got more than
And
um,
others.
other programs might have been doing in that area. And I had specific professors for whom it was really their passion to integrate that into their work, also just because of their lived experiences. And so I'm grateful to them for being like incredibly intentional about being more inclusive in their material.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good for them. Last last ish structured question because I think I have a second one after
Mm,
this. But do you feel like professors or advisors take advantage of their power in
for
their
sure.
programs?
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
the
And
one that wouldn't help you?
yes, yeah. But I also think about supervisors a lot because, like, I think
Yeah.
for the most part, the negative experiences with some professors were outliers for me. Like, they were very specific people. Most of the challenges that I experienced in this area were on clinical training sites. Uh, and I have way too many of these experiences than we have time to talk about. But, like, I mentioned the thing about dynamics of being a woman, being supervised by white women, and the power issues that would come up there. Um, and being aware that they felt threatened by my knowledge and experience and questions. Um, Having a supervisor who, like, said to me once, like, sex offenders only spoke to me in therapy because they thought I was attractive. Um, and, like, it wasn't because I was actually skilled in the work. And this was another white woman. Um, I I've had supervisors who, like, threatened my like threatened to do things like burn down my school because they were upset about something that happened from a policy perspective, like in my supervision. Um and in the beginning I definitely, like, because I was new to the work, I questioned my abilities. I questioned my gut
Mhm.
because, like, I was new, and I sometimes went along with decisions that I didn't feel comfortable going along with because my supervisor told me to do it. Um, and then later that leading to a really negative outcome. And I wonder, like, what would have happened if I had followed, like, my little baby developing clinical gut. um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I feel like I'm, like, just going down, like, a huge list, but I remember asking someone for, like, external supervision for forensic work. This was a black man. And the meeting seemed to be going fine. And then near the end of the meeting, he started to hit on me and was like, you're really attractive, you're very smart. And, like, and it was clear to me. And I remember feeling like just terror because I'm, like, alone with this man in his office.
Yeah,
And I came to him for help. And it was just the ickiest, like, I couldn't get out of there fast
it's
enough. And I
gross.
remember Dr. Pratt was another person that I ended up talking to about that. And he did, like, say, like, if you want to do anything, if you want to, like, and I opted not to, but there were just so many abuses of power, both subtle and overt, that were a part of my experiences at clinical sites. And I know that that's not unique to me in any particular way, unfortunately. I supervise now. And one of the things that I do is actively ask my trainees about negative experiences that they have had. And no one, not people are not necessarily going to come out and just tell you that immediately, right? They need to know that they can trust you. And so I do have, like, a very particular way that I introduce that topic into my supervision,
Mhm.
um, because it's so important to me that the power that I have now as a supervisor is not misused.
Mhm.
Um, and that it can be a reparative experience for people who likely have gone through some really messed up
Yeah.
supervision experiences. That was a really long answer to your question, but
I
yeah,
mean, it's an important one. Um, it's an important answer. And I definitely think with Gen Z coming up, or already in, and then now the next gen. No, just Gen Z from early to later, as they come up in this field, I do think the field is going to have a reckoning with its abuse of power as professors, as supervisors, etc. So I do think it's an important one.
I think it needs to, but I don't know if it will. That's the thing that scares me,
Mhm.
especially as I keep hearing these stories that my supervisees bring me,
Mhm.
and that some of the response to that from other supervisors is like, well, how can you believe what they say, right? And
What?
it's the same response as, like, I remember saying to someone, I tend to generally believe people when they tell me they've had negative experiences with other clinicians.
Yeah.
And someone had said, well, they have these different things going on, like, it might be, their misinterpretation of the situation. And so like the patient gets blamed in the same way that the student gets blamed, you know, and that doesn't mean that people don't have individual culpability. I'm not saying that
Sure.
there are situations that don't exist like that. But my point is, I think more often than not, the proliferation of the abuse of power is more dominant than people somehow trying to manipulate folks.
100%. Right. 100%. Yeah. Hmm. Well, anyway, on that note, would you do it again?
I would, but I pause because this gets into something that we will talk about together after we kind of discussed your experiences. But I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the way in which mental health training capitalizes on our trauma
Mm-hmm.
to sort of bring us into the fold of this field without really creating a space for reflection for what we're actually signing up for
Mm-hmm.
and and there are different choices that I might have made about my what I did post graduate if I had even had the space to think about what is it like to not be a student anymore. I wasn't really prepared for that. And I felt like all my decisions that were made subsequently thereafter were just survival based decisions. Like I
Mm.
just need a job. And so I ignored red flags, even little, like ones that seemed little, but really weren't little, and ended up in a really shitty first job, you know? And so because I didn't feel like I had the space to really be choosy. Um, and so I think that like grad school in general leaves you in sort of a survival space. And then
100%.
everything else that you're doing after that is about survival. And that's not true for everybody, right? Like the somewhat more wealthy people in my program had significantly less to worry about. And that doesn't mean that they didn't go through their own shitty experiences. I know they did,
Right.
but
But you also didn't have to worry about food
right,
or
exactly.
rent.
Right. There were times where I would be driving on like the last of my tank of gas, like it's on empty, and I pray that I make it home from my internship site because I have no money to fill up for a couple of days, you know? And so those were the kinds of things that were going on in the background, in addition to me working like 2 to 3 jobs while I was in school, you know,
Yeah.
just to food to eat. So I think like if I knew that that's what I was gonna go through, I don't know if I would have done it. And at the same time, I don't regret the decision.
Mm-hmm.
I don't regret my career either. You know, it's just I didn't know what it was gonna look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like therapy, like therapy, right? You don't even really know what you're signing up for.
Right. Right. Yeah. And are we doing a whole other episode on? Yes, we are on changing the
And
journey, changing the
yeah.
call. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure we didn't accidentally skip over that last episode or this episode. Okay.
Oh, we are doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure. I'm sorry because it's just so important, and I think it's a really important part of your of your identity and how it's changing, right? Like when we started having conversations about this podcast and like moving away from using the word therapist at all, even
Mhm.
though for me it applies, for you it doesn't. And I mean it's irrelevant. It's just a label. But I just want to make sure we didn't miss that. Okay. Anything else you want to say or add about your grad school experience?
Mm, I'm sure if somebody asked me, I could say a lot more about it. Um, like get into the details of financial decisions and all of these different things, or even like people telling me I couldn't do exactly what I'm doing now. I did have a guest speaker professor who came in one day and was like, "What do you guys want to do?" And I told him I want to have a practice that does both of these things. And she's like, "That's not possible." And I was like, "Well, we have male professors in our program doing that." And so being condescended to by another woman about what I wanted to do with my life. Um, and I made it happen.
Was it a white woman?
Of course it was a white woman,
I'm just
girl.
making sure. I mean, I figured, but I'm just making sure. A couple of us are undercover white women.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not all agents for the cause, is
Yeah,
what I mean. So I just wanted to make sure.
that's true. That's true.
I was going to
Oh
say
no,
we can do a whole episode
yeah,
on white women telling us how to be women.
exactly. Um, but no, I was gonna say y'all can hang out with us on our Patreon for some of like the extra scoop.
Yeah, yeah,
There is so much to be
yeah.
said, but I think that sums it up for me.
Okay, sounds good. And just like a heads up, I think mine will look a little different because I want to tell y'all the tea of what happened to me. For better or worse, maybe it's my own trauma response, but it might look a little bit different when you join us for my experience. But as always, we want to practice what we preach and remind you to take a deep breath. All right. If breathing is triggering for you, please feel free to just put your hand on your heart or sit this out altogether, whatever you're called to. So if you are breathing with us, please take a deep breath in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. And out through your mouth slowly, like you're breathing through a straw. And let's get into some fucking joy and thriving for this week. Do you want to go first, Kasara?
Yeah, sure. My latest joy is that I've been able to read physical books again.
Yay.
I've had a really hard time with doing that since COVID,
Mm.
and I was started Draco Malfoy and the mortifying ordeal of being in love, and somewhere on
Parody
here,
fan fiction.
I know somewhere we'll talk about like the sort of the tension of being queer folks still in our HP era, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
especially with, that woman being a turf. But
But it's fan fiction, so it doesn't count. It's
fan
how we
fiction,
can live in the world without supporting a transphobic twat.
yes. But that book has been so good.
Yeah.
So that is bringing me a lot of joy right now. What about you?
I think this 2024 for me was the Hermione year. It was not a pairing I ever cared about. I'd never really cared about fan fiction. I knew about it, but I just didn't have an understanding of it. And then I got into Manacled. If you know, you know. If you
Mhm.
don't, you should. It's off the internet now, though, so good luck. And then, I moved further into that specific pairing, which like is a little on the nose, I think, for the two of us. I don't know
Mhm.
about you. The reason I love it is because it's this super brainy, smart girl and a guy who deeply loves how smart and brainy she is. It's a little too on the nose about why I like it.
Well,
But anyway,
but
so I
it's
think,
also about him transforming into
yes.
someone who understands like social issues better, right? So that's
So yes, my moment of joy and thriving this week is that Casera loves to Matmobile, to Draco Malfoy and the mortifying ordeal of being in love, because I love that book too. I think it's my favorite. There's another one that's a really close tie called Remain Nameless that I hope you read too. But
I have that on my list. I have it on my list. Don't worry.
yeah, but yeah, the Matmobile is just nothing but a pure joy, a deeply heart-achingly slow burn in all the delicious ways. So
So
yay!
good.
So that's mine.
And by the way, I used to write fan fiction when I was like in my high school era. And so somewhere on there, there's like a live journal or whatever. I don't know where it is. So as an anime video game person, like this is the world that I live in. So, you know. So with, with that said, we are looking forward to you joining us for our next episode. We're going to talk about Blanca's experience in grad school.
Buckle up.
Until next time, everybody.
Bye. Adios.
Ciao. Thank you for joining us on our journey. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Please leave us a review and subscribe. You can email us at calltohealingpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on YouTube and Instagram at Call to Healing. Sign up for our mailing list, book us for speaking engagements and consulting, or donate to support this endeavor at our one-time donation link in the show notes. You can find even more goodness from us on Patreon at patreon.com/calltohealing. Keep in mind our views are our own and do not represent any organization we may be a part of. Even though we're both clinicians, listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapeutic relationship or clinical contract. If you hear anything that resonates with you in crisis, please seek the help of a trusted provider or the resources provided on our social media page. And remember, you're made for more than just healing. You're made to thrive. Until next time, rest easy.